Editing, as we've heard a million times, is the final rewrite of the film, and that is intensely true. Entire stories can be reworked and restructured in the edit, even within scenes. You can get in with a precise scalpel and adjust even the most subtle of intentions. An edit can orient and surprise the audience, or disorient and disappoint. A bad edit can make amazing material not so great, and a great edit can patch up some not so great material. But what makes a good edit? How do you take the material and construct something with intention? This is what I want to look at today, and these are concepts that work for any edit: brand work, music videos, series, vlog, and of course, film. And I was inspired to dive into this topic finally thanks to our partners at ArtGrid and Artlist. They just brought back their biggest creators competition with the ArtGrid and Artlist Edit Challenge, where you can have a shot at winning $75,000 in filmmaking gear from amazing companies like Blackmagic, Design, Nanlite, BenQ, Jayun, Rode, Rhino, Insta360, LumaCube, MZ, and Maxon. It's a video editing contest that I'm one of the judges for, and to enter, you'll create a video using only ArtGrid footage and Artlist music. And there's 3 categories: a made-up brand ad, a made-up movie trailer, or music video for an Artlist song. You'll submit your entry by uploading your video to YouTube with ArtGrid Artlist Edit Challenge and the hashtag AG Edit Challenge in the title. You can also get bonus points by sharing a timeline breakdown of your edit to Instagram. Just make sure to use the hashtag AG Edit Challenge and mention artgrid.io and artlist.io. The contest starts on August 23rd and ends September 23rd, and your video is going to be judged by creativity, storytelling, and of course your overall editing skills, again with me being one of the judges. Contests like this really are great ways to get your work in front of people, but also just an amazing motivation to try something new, stretch yourself, and of course be creative. So definitely check out the details below and join the ArtGrid and Artlist Edit Challenge.
When do you cut to a close-up of one actor rather than the other? When do you use wide shots? For example, Scorsese in a famous scene in Goodfellas where Joe Pesci says, "What's so funny about me?" Very interesting thing that Marty did there was he shot that in medium shots. There are no close-ups in that sequence because he knew that what the reactions of the people around Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta were reacting to the sense of danger that was building as Pesci just kept saying, "What's so funny about what's it?" That you almost feel that Ray Liotta may get killed there.
I realize I say this about every aspect of filmmaking on this show, but editing really is one of my favorite stages of production. There's so much excitement around having that footage and what it can ultimately become. There's terror when the rough cut is inevitably rough and a rush of adrenaline when you finally get it working. But let's dial way back. Let's trim things down to the most simplistic ideas here. Like Hitchcock said, editing or cutting is really assembly. The assembly of visuals and audio elements to create context for your audience. I think of it in terms of a nodal chain, or even just the order in which you place effects on a clip inside your editor or compositor. Each effect adjusts the image based on what came before it. Each new addition after that is building off the context of that first applied effect. So that image will be altered if we adjust the order of these effects. And that is exactly how editing works. You are coloring the image of your story with the order of these images, sounds, and events. This idea is called the Kuleshov effect, which is named after a Russian filmmaker, Lev Kuleshov, around the 1910s. It was a test he did with a single shot of a man, with the only thing changed between these shots was what he was implied to be looking at. With the different versions, the audience projected an assumed emotion on the character. He's looking at food, so he must be hungry. He's looking at a dead body, so he's filled with grief. And of course, you've probably heard this before, most famously from Hitchcock, but its origination is with Lev Kuleshov. And I don't bring this up to get all film school on you, but because it is the basis of why we cut. One image colors the next, and so on. Really understanding that gives you the power to intelligently paint your narrative. Let's look further. The idea of shot 1 informs shot 2. Take this. Shot 1, we have a character looking in a direction. Shot 2 will then be assumed to be what that character is looking at. If we continue continue further to shot 3, a reaction shot to what we assume is what they saw in shot 2. And these shots could come from completely different locations or days. If you assemble the pieces right, you can guide the viewer into an intended story. And it's one of the most used techniques I can think of, often to great and deeply emotional effect. Of course, it's about all of the context that was given before these moments, but in this moment, it's as simple as connecting these elements to place the audience in that moment with that character. Again, another perfect example of what we mean by the language of film. Of course, this idea can be used for tension as well, and sticking with tension for a second, there's a really great bit from Hitchcock about building tension that expresses some of these ideas.
4 people are sitting around a table talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to smithereens. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table and will go off in 5 minutes. Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different because you've given them that information that in 5 minutes' time, that bomb will go off. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there.
Right there, he's talking about the overall idea of tension, but it's really very much about editing. When do you cut to the bomb? When do you give the audience that bit of information and contextualize the scene in that way? And you could start to see how we can easily gauge what is good editing versus bad. Good editing is one that harnesses and wields intention skillfully, meaning your orientation or disorientation of a moment is always purposefully driven as a storytelling device. Bad editing is when that intention gets away from the storyteller and the results are unintended. That's where you get the moments where you feel frustrated and confused, or something feels messy and you don't fully know why. But when to make a cut and to what can be a tricky question, especially when starting out. There's no hard rules in filmmaking, but Walter Murch, one of the greatest editors of all time, has a rule of 6 that he says boils things down to a checkbox, so to speak, that he uses with every cut. So when he's making a cut, it should check off all of these boxes, or as he says, at least the first 3. And he says this list is in order of importance. Again, according to Murch, 1 is emotion. This is all about tone. Is this cut the correct tone for the film and the scene? Murch calls this a transition from one shot to another. Does it carry the correct emotion between that transition? Number 2 is story. Does it advance the story, or, like I was saying above, continue to contextualize? What does this cut give us about our story? Number 3 is rhythm. Murch calls this the music of the cut, which is pacing. Did this have the right pace for the moment? For instance, fast cutting and a slow dramatic moment would likely be the wrong rhythm. And as Murch says, these 3 are so completely connected that you will rarely ever make a good cut without all 3 of those needs being met, especially emotion and rhythm. While those concepts are more digestible, separated in practice, I don't think they can be separated at all. Like I said with the quick cutting rhythm, that exact example works for emotion as well. You offset the rhythm and the emotion suffers. Number 4 is what he calls eye tracing, which is just how you are directing the viewer where to look. For this, he says the screen has 5 quadrants: upper left, upper right, lower left, lower right, and the center. Using this is incredibly important, especially with fast-moving things like action. You use techniques to guide the viewer's eye to a point, then on the cut continue to guide them. A heightened example of this is from Mad Max Fury Road. George Miller made the choice to keep the focus point of action center framed at all times. So with the quick cutting, the viewer never had to search the screen. The audience's eye would always process the information that was important very quickly. If you put a center marker on the film and watch it back, it's insane how consistent this is. Number 5 is dimensional space, which is essentially the 180-degree rule. Are the characters looking in the right direction? The line of action in the right direction? And so on. This is broken all the time, but it is good to keep in mind. And finally, number 6 is 3-dimensional space, which is talking about geography, the continuity of 3D space. Do you orient your audience to the space when you're telling your story and where that story takes place or not? Either way is is fine as long as it's an intentional choice. All rules are made to be broken, and even Murch himself says the final 3 don't always get checked off, but the top 3 are solid rules to never break, which can easily be boiled down to, am I hitting the right pace and tone while furthering my story? The other rules are great as well though, especially the eye tracing. A great example when I didn't get that right was from my short film There Comes a Knocking. The end scare, while it did work for many, I think wasn't as impactful as it could have been had I had the creature on the other side of Stephanie. With where I put the creature, your eyes had to find it and the shock factor was diminished. That was one of the many lessons I learned from that short film. And I know that this was breaking these ideas down to their most simplistic forms, but I think it's when we make these concepts bite-sized and try to process them there that we really start to make them our own and wield them intelligently in the stories we tell. Of course, don't forget about the Art Grid and Art List Edit Challenge, which is going on right now. Links below on that. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.